Rick and Morty presents The Council of Ricks. We started out a long time ago, wish I knew how long ago it was, in the Citadel of Ricks, the interdimensional home of an infinite number of Ricks and Mortys. Wait, how can any one place be interdimensional? And how can any one place be home to an infinite amount of people? Anyways, we see a Rick on TV saying that it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Then he tries to get some shoes off and gets mad. Then a Rick at the bar hears a robot saying that a Rick Prime was once the Citadel's top detective, and now he's a private eye, taking any job he can. And because the exposition bot was insulting his decision to give up a perfectly good life of friends and seeing animal companions, he casually shoots the robot without looking at it while trying to drink. It's an interesting subversion that a Rick called Rick Prime isn't the main character of the series. And we don't want him to be. The bartender, who's not a Rick or a Morty, asks how he's supposed to know people's tragic backstories without his exposition bot, which I guess scans people's brains with Rick technology to find out this information. How's he not a Rick or Morty? Are they in the Citadel of Ricks or not? Rick says satisfyingly, find a more natural way to introduce information. Then he threatens him with a ray gun. And then Officer PB tells him to calm down. He's on a special assignment, and a Rick named Reek the Fourth asks him to come with him. Rick shoots another exposition bot, so Prime gets into the police car with them, explaining that he spent his whole day getting drunk. I would ask how he hasn't died of alcohol poisoning, but I guess he's a robot or a cyborg in just the right way. Or he has a anti-dying of alcoholism ray that he shoots himself with. Because Reek arbitrarily refuses to tell him what's going on right away, Prime makes fun of him, asking if a fancy military-type Rick is slumming it because his father got mad and took away his allowance. Reek says that he volunteered, thinking that serving the Citadel is the greatest honor a Rick can have. Translation, he's arrogant. Prime says sarcastically that there's nothing more honorable than getting shot in the face. So does that mean that, realistically, C-137 Rick isn't the only one that hates the Council of Ricks? Because there's actually no Council of Ricks yet, actually. My point is, if Rick Primes can hate the concept of serving the Citadel, then there really is no way that C-137 Rick is the only one that hates the Council of Ricks. I like that PB is constantly chipper, trying to make up for the grim tone. Prime gets taken to Rickingham Palace. And Morty says that the Prime Rick Minister has a lot of appointments today running the Citadel. Meetings and phone calls, and he's supposed to cut a ribbon on the new pastrami Ricks. I can't help but start smiling as Rick Minister says, wait, is Pastrami Rick a new pastrami sandwich shop? Or is it a Rick from a universe of pastrami people? Prime doesn't want to help him, and Rick Minister tells his secretary to get PB to the commissary and get him some of those cookies that come with their own frosting dip. That's sweet. He doesn't have to do that. He shows Prime a held hologram of a space train with a bad name that's lampshaded. He says Prime's target is on board, and their intel says he's carrying the most dangerous weapon ever. Prime asks if it's a nuke that releases space rabies, as I'm still smiling uncontrollably at how silly this is. Reek says that their target is looking to sell this weapon off-world. Is their target a Morty? That'd help for the irony and drama, and give him a more sympathetic excuse if he's just fed up with the abuse of Rick. Prime lampshades their mistake in asking him of all people for help, because if they wanted a Rick who cared about saving the universe, they should have gone with a Rick that didn't waste all his money on booze and trench coats. I wish I knew why he chose this kind of life. Predictably, the seller is a Morty, and it turns out it's his Morty, which explains why he was chosen for the task, I guess. I guess because he'd know how he thinks the best, but he'd be the least qualified because he'd be the only Rick with any attachment to him. The rest of the Ricks would be just as capable as him, and not hesitate. And I'm sure most of the Mortys think the same, and it'd be hard to have a difference in how a specific Morty would think. And they've also taken the liberty of gathering a few other Ricks. We see Zeta Rick say that he's rigged this entire place to blow unless the shopkeeper gives him what he wants. A scarf and plaid. I love the infinite creative potential of a character like Rick. This is why this kind of story was made. Then after we see some Ricks screaming while shooting lasers, there's some impressively logical writing. As one of them says all the screaming really hurts his throat. And another one says, I told you we should have brought lozenges. Then we see another Rick in a spaceship being chased by flying police cars press a button for a speed boost. And a spaceship crashes inside of a building with a band in it. Again. And then we briefly see a Rick with indestructible legs. And not anything else indestructible. How is he the only Rick like that? I guess most Ricks don't have the nerve to get rid of their own legs and replace them with robot legs. But you'd think a Rick would be able to make a roboticizer. Quantum Rick says they're in range of the space train now, and asks everyone to meet in the conference room for battle planning and some food. It was nice of him to give them some food. Prime's the one making the speech, surprisingly when he was forced to take along at first. He says they're almost within teleport range. There's a range now? I guess it must be really inferior to the portal gun technology. He says they're gonna pop in there, secure the secret weapon, and get out. I'm guessing it'll be much more complicated than that, and things will go horribly wrong. But this just gets me excited instead of frustrating, because I trust the writing to be good in this comic. So instead, I'm glad the story will get to last longer. Some of the Ricks gladly say they'll kill everything that moves. And realistically, after Prime says to leave Morty Prime to him, he looks sad when he remembers the days Morty told him they were through, and said that the next time they meet they're gonna be enemies. Then Prime tells everybody in the ship to wipe their feet before they get back, or else they won't get their deposit back from the rental place. There's no ways Morty turning on him is why he came to the Citadel though, because he could have erased his memory to change his mind, not to mention replaced him with a clone. They wonder why the train is empty when their scanner said this place should be crawling with galactic soldiers. I can understand a Morty hating their particular Rick, but why would they think that justifies destroying an entire universe? I can understand wanting to target only Ricks in particular with it, but that weapon's too powerful for that. Maybe if it was a Rick it'd be less of a stretch, but then it'd be boring. Predictably, after one of the Ricks says they'll be fine forever, he gets killed. Rick says they're not cloaked, they're using a device to be just barely out of sync with their reality. He was smart enough to have a device with them prepared for this exact situation, letting them fight back. Prime says he's got some unfinished business to take care of as Morty Prime runs out of the room without any armor on or anything. Reek says he's clearly being set up and he's taking the bait, and Prime says that if he doesn't start getting revenge on people now, he'll be doing this forever. Morty asks why his device isn't working, and then he gets threatened by Prime in the teleporter room, who smartly tells him to make sure his hands in the air are empty. Morty says that Prime just doesn't understand. I guess he was framed since he's panicking, but he could be lying. He presses a button on the desk as Prime says that he's blocked his self-destruct sequence, and wants him to teleport a secret weapon in here. He asks if this is a cloning pod. Morty says, "Rick, you need to ask yourself. They sent you for a reason, you know? They knew you'd kill me or I'd kill you, because I started asking questions." He tells him to do himself a favor and blow up the pod without opening it, and begs him to use a backup escape plan as he teleports away. Wow, that was touching. He still cares about him after all. And that is kind of foreshadowed. It makes a lot of sense because the whole franchise always has a theme going on that no matter what Rick does to Morty, no matter how much he calls him out on it, Morty will always care about him and keep coming back to him. Of course, the fact that Rick can erase his memories does a good job of explaining it. Rick says that Morty set the teleporter to random, and we see him running away in the Vampires and Turtlenecks universe, which made me smile and almost giggle from how silly and contrasting that concept was. It turns out Prime's refusing to take the hint from his Morty, who clearly cares about him, and wants to open the pod anyways, because when people force him across the universe, he wants to know why, even though the mission says not to open the pod. He's threatened with getting jailed, and he says that the whole plan sucks and they're all sent here to die, so he wants to know what's so important. He finds an unconscious Rick in the pod, and it turns out that cloning Ricks was outlawed by the Rick-Neva Convention. I guess that makes sense, because there's already way too many Ricks, and overpopulation would happen if it wasn't outlawed. I guess Project Phoenix is illegal there then. One of the Ricks says that this is like the plot of Blade Runner, which I've never seen before and only know about by name. So at least this is going to educate me on what the plot of Blade Runner is like. Rick says that he suspected this was the case. It all started a few months back when he noticed a change in his best friend Safari Rick. He got suspicious because he said he didn't want to get a pancake for the table they could all share. Rick says that he instantly knew he was a fake afterwards. He started doing some digging and found out that these replicants had infiltrated all of Rickkind. I hope we learn why this is happening, because the cloning seems arbitrary. What motivation do any of the Ricks have to make clones and wake them up? Prime says that this was all a trap, and the replicants knew Rick was showing up. Every Rick agrees to solve this problem individually. And in the middle of all that, the clone wakes up and says that he says they should give up and let the replicants kill them and take over. So of course he ends up killed. I guess he said this to have fun after he knew he was gonna die. Anyways, Officer PB goes to watch a dog video on his smart TV, and then somehow Prime hacks it so that he can sneak up behind him and punch him in the face. Why did he need to hack it to do that? He was distracted anyways. And the video was already uploaded, how could he change it after that? He asks how he knew he'd watched that video, and he suspiciously says it was a lucky guess. Then it turns out that he added a sentence after that where he said that if the viewer isn't the intended target, please disregard this message. That made me giggle, especially because the text was smaller than the rest of it. I love that this was actually written, to try and make proper sense of it. I guess he looked up his browser history ahead of time to find out exactly which video he was going to watch next. Because the fact remains, he could have watched any video, so how did he know which video to hack? Unless he looked up his browser history and figured out the pattern of what he was watching. Officer PB is asked who's behind the replicants and says that he can't tell him or they'll kill him. Data threatens him with a pillowcase full of snakes and a raccoon because he was too lazy to do his original plan. So immediately, PB is scared into agreeing to tell him the truth. Realistically, if he's innocent and doesn't know the answer, or even if he does know the answer, there's nothing stopping him from lying to them here. Then he could go hide when they want to find him again. After it's revealed that the raccoon ate all the snakes, PBA says that the mission was supposed to fail, and they thought the Ricks needed to be killed so that they could take over the Citadel. It turns out the bad guy is someone who isn't scared of Rex. That's not a very good hint. He inexplicably takes forever to tell them who it is, when he could have easily told them who it is right away panels ago. That was forced. So he gets laminated by a laser, which is a creative thing to write to happen to him. It was nice of Prime to be upset about that. At least being creative tried to help make up for the fact that it was dark. One of the Ricks says that they're getting away, and the Ricks start driving after him, locked onto his gun's energy signature, only for him to escape into the sewers. Prime says that this place is a maze, so they're all gonna have to split up. I understand why he says this, because it means that at least one of them would end up going down the right path and finding the bad guy. So it'd be much faster that way. But I thought they were going after a super weapon. Turns out it was just replicants. Why did anyone... I guess the first clone maker was just making a Project Phoenix and the clone got activated early. Like he wanted to use him to get out of doing something. One of the Ricks says that this reminds him of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I've also never seen. Okay, having someone reference the similarity of a plot to one plot is bad enough, but when you have it happen twice, it just makes the story look lazy. It'd suck if this happened a third time just because rule of 3. But I guess it'll help make the plot of this particular issue look more interesting than just ripping off one plot in its entirety. Instead it'd be a mishmash, so multiple things will be happening. Reek says he didn't find anything down that way, and it was a dead end. Then he smirks, pointing a gun at Prime, and says that they don't even know what the replicant looks like, and it could be anybody. If it's Reek, why doesn't he shoot him right away? That's stupid of him. Prime says it's best not to worry about it. A text box says one betrayal later, and we see Prime being led to someone by Reek the clone. I wish that text box didn't exist. It turns out they've cloned all the most influential Rex in the universe. Which universe? It should have said multiverse, actually, now that I think about it. Why'd they do this? Why make them all replicants? What's the point? Functionally, what's the difference? What did they have to gain from replacing them with clones who are just like them anyways? I like that the leader says it was a bit of a hassle to do this, because it was. I'm guessing this guy's a Morty too, because he's not grey like a Rick. You would think if this was someone a Rick would know, he'd immediately recognize his voice, unless there's a voice modulator in him. He asked him how he got Morty Prime to work for him, and shockingly, it's a Jerry. Well, Morty Prime was sent to the vampire universe, without a portal gun I guess, so realistically, he probably met a tragic end. It makes sense that a Jerry would get a portal gun and want to get rid of all the Ricks. The problem is, he doesn't want to do that, he wants to clone Ricks. Why would someone who hates Ricks want to make more of them? That's awfully merciful of them. That's pretty forgiving. Rick's bullied Jerry's all over the place. And it turns out all the people behind him are Jerry's too. Wow, I actually forgot about this. Seriously, are the clones only different in the sense that they're supposed to kill Ricks? Are they programmed by a device to kill each other when it's all done? Is their brain reprogrammed so that they want to do that? I guess so. Does he want to get rid of the entire real Rick population of the Citadel? That would make sense for Jerry as an evil plan. Like, he'd think, if there's gonna be Ricks around, they should be my Ricks. Jerry says that he's the smartest Jerry ever. Prime asks if he wants to kill all the Ricks, pointlessly replace them with clone Ricks anyways, and take over the Citadel and then be king. Smart Jerry's thinking bigger than the Citadel because he'll never be satisfied. He says that a ton of planets would pay for a Rick of their very own. And with its advertising mind, he could project that out of all the companies in the universe, they'd be the top 17. I guess his idea is the clone Ricks would be programmed to be nice and only want to help the planets they're sold to, because otherwise, obviously the plan would backfire and no one would have any reason to think that the Ricks would actually help them. Of course, even a Jerry can only be so smart, as Prime lampshades how stupid the beef slogan, "How's the beef?" is if you think about it. Prime says that even the smartest Jerry is dumber than a Rick. Suddenly Jerry gets kneed in the weak spot. I really wish those white lines weren't drawn everywhere. It just draws attention away from the knee itself when you're glancing at the panel. Then after some Jerrys argue with each other because both of them said the same thing that didn't need to be said, one of them gets lasered by Reek because he pretended to be his own clone. So the one betrayal later text box, that's why I didn't want it to exist, because it's actually a complete lie. So why aren't they being attacked while they're talking to each other and stating the obvious? Then the Rick truck drives through the wall with the Ricks in it beating the army together. Smart Jerry says he's been making counterfeit Ricks for years and they're everywhere, and he'll never stop them. If he's been making them for years, it's a miracle he hasn't replaced every Rick in the Citadel of Ricks. He warps away, and Prime asks Reek if he thought he would be fooled by the same trick twice. He fooled with his Final Destination a little, and it turns out he was warped to the Death That Eat People universe, which is a Chekhov's gun since it was referenced earlier. The slapstick against the Jerrys was way too gory for me to find it satisfying, which ruined most of the appeal of it. I'd have liked to see them get slapped around and smacked, but that went overboard. They wonder how they could find out who's a replicant, and Rick's just getting blood from all of them, and not just some bag of blood one of them somehow found on the way here. Logically, wouldn't the replicant blood be exactly the same, because that's what clones are? Logically, this plan would be pointless, doomed to failure. It does kind of make sense that there'd be a way to tell which Rick is a clone, because Jerry would want to find out for himself, so that he'd know which Ricks are on his side. But it makes more sense if the way he found out which one was a clone was by saying a specific phrase in front of him that they're programmed to react a certain way to. It turns out that only true Ricks will be able to see a magic eye drawing of a tugboat. I call bullshit. Replicants would be too similar to the original's biology for that to work. The writer thought he wrote himself into a corner here. So we see that every Rick in the multiverse was tested. How did they find out that only true Ricks can see the magic eye drawing? I forget. At least Jerry's plan was creative. Of course, an advertising executive would want to make money instead of just wanting the revenge lazy route of killing every Rick, because that won't benefit him. But wouldn't the whole point of having clone Ricks be that the clone would be complacent to what he wants to do? Obedient? Being nice to him? That'd require a brainwashing chip of some kind, like in the neck or brain. Ricks would just find out how to detect something like that, require an x-ray for everyone. Even I could have written this part better. The writer went for a joke instead, but I don't see how merely referencing magic eye drawings is funny. Of course, I guess the machine that makes them would have to make it so that the brains that they have will be loyal to Jerry. They could test that by bringing a Jerry in front of every Rick and asking them to kick him. And if he refuses to kick him, that's the clone. That has to be true for every clone anyways. So Jerry would just settle for that for a way to decide which Rick is on his side or not. He wouldn't make him not able to see a magic eye drawing. It turns out the Rick minister who tried to get them killed was a clone as well. because he gave the wrong answer to the poster. Prime switched out the drawing of the tugboat for something else, and this is just a picture of him flipping them off while dressed as a lumberjack, which somehow only true Ricks can see. There's no way that clones wouldn't be able to see double to see magic eye pictures, when they're by definition genetically identical. How would they not be able to go cross-eyed temporarily? They have two eyes, and both of their eyes are just as functional. I guess they weren't. I guess every clone Rick has only one eye work. You'd think they'd be able to figure out which one's a clone from that, too. Rick freaks out because the Citadel needs a leader. So Prime says that while he hates to admit it, the juries are right, and they can't just have one leader calling all the shots. When was that ever their point? When did they say that? Anyways, Prime comes up with a plan that whatever happens next at the Citadel, they'll do it as a council. Okay, but they're still all a parallel universe version of the same person, so what's the point of having more than one Rick in charge? They're always gonna agree with each other, they're always gonna think the same way. I guess it's to try to balance things out to prevent one super evil Rick from being fully in charge, because I know that some Ricks can be a lot eviler than the others. So this whole story was meant as a build up to the origin of the Council of Ricks. But that's not really what I wanted. And I don't think that's what anyone needed to be told, because what we really needed to know was how the Citadel as a whole got started, not just the Council. It didn't need a convoluted 30-page story to explain how the Council got formed when we still don't know how the Rick Minister got his job. Go figure, people would realize that having one guy in power is too flimsy. And guess what? They decided to go back to that anyways, because evil Morty got elected. And there was no advertisement to most of the people in the Citadel Ricks that it's not just him that's going to be in charge. It's not like it invalidates the story, but it makes me wonder what the whole point was. It is obvious that an egomaniac like Rick would want to live in a whole city of Ricks, because most Ricks don't hate themselves enough to think of how annoying it would be to have to deal with a whole bunch of people with his flaws. So there would be demand. But how did enough Ricks coordinate to make sure that there was just one city instead of a ton of cities, because a ton of Ricks would have the same idea? How did the establishing Ricks know when to stop portaling to other universes and asking Ricks if they want to abandon their Beths and Mortys to come live in the Citadel? I guess only the ones who care the least about their families would be okay with willingly coming to live there, on top of liking other versions of themselves enough. Okay, that can make sense. There's infinite realities. And I guess they're forced to not leave the Citadel if they don't like it. Which is why portal guns are banned, and even making portal juice is illegal. That's an obvious rule patch. It's the only logical explanation for why every Rick doesn't leave and leave the Citadel a ghost town after a week when they realize how tiresome the place is. So they're all trapped there, but you can't really feel that sorry for them because they're all constantly causing trouble to other people. It's better to keep them trapped with each other. This story was about explaining why the former dictator of the Citadel of Ricks got replaced with a whole council. Again, there was never any indication that there was a dictator before them at all. Or anybody before them. So this tacked-on ending didn't need to exist, and just taunted me about the fact that I wasn't told what I really wanted to know. It is obvious how the Citadel was established when you think about it. But at least one page showing its backstory would have been nice. If it's obvious, then that makes it even more baffling that it wasn't explained. It's a story about Ricks discovering that Rick clones are being made in an attempt to replace and kill all of the real Ricks, and make Jerry money. And the difference between the clones and real ones is that they can't see a magic eye picture, somehow. And instead of the predictable twists, the real villain all along was actually the smartest Jerry, who wants to advertise to other countries that they could buy a Rick of their own to take advantage of his genius. And if that was going to go right for him, then that was a great plan, because it meant that all those planets would have really benefited from the Ricks. Imagine all the diseases they could have cured. Sure, it's a get-rich-quick scheme, so he's got a selfish reason, but if that was gonna work out how he intended, that would have been awesome. I guess he's apparently forgiving enough that he's willing to put up with the clone Ricks being around if they're brainwashed to do what he wants, with no explanation of how. And that's why he doesn't just want to get rid of all Ricks ever. That'd be the obvious plan, but it'd be too uncreative compared to this, where he took advantage of his advertising job and could actually benefit from a plan like this. The Ricks ended up getting over to him because they tracked down Jerry into the sewers, and one of the Ricks pretended to be his own clone. which allowed him to lead Rick to Jerry. And then Jerry ended up getting killed in a bunch of surprise attacks along with all the other Jerrys. As the Rick truck drives through the wall and cartoonishly goes through it with none of the Ricks just being sent forwards into a non-destroyed wall and dying. No, instead it creates a hole for it to harmlessly keep driving through. You'd think it'd slow down a little and that sends some of the Ricks falling off the truck. You'd think they'd all die from the truck being suddenly stopped and making them smack into something. At least the story explains why the specific Ricks in the council are there. They're the ones considered most capable, and therefore most likely to stop the clones from taking over. And the dictator himself was replaced with the clone, so he sent them to a trap for them. So naturally, Prime Rick suspected him and showed him a magic eye picture they changed the appearance of. And that's what got him killed. It was an interesting story. It even made me giggle at one point. The writing was impressive.